And the top thing that I love to pick up for reselling on eBay are... Hey everybody, Thrifting Tiger here. Today we're going to talk about the top 5 things that I love to pick up at thrift stores, yard sales, whatever it might be, to resell on eBay. Starting things off with number 5 are electronics. Some electronics can do pretty good if you find like VCRs, DVD recorders, household appliances like a stand mixer, coffee maker, some video game systems, whatever it might be, any sort of electronics. They usually have a pretty good sell-through rate on eBay, depending on the item, of course. Not all electronics are the same. Typical electronics that I do pick up myself are going to be some unique items that you normally don't find. Some electronic items like the old Sony Video 8 recorders, like the handheld camcorders. Those you can do pretty well because people do buy them. If you want to transfer those tapes into like digital format, and to do that you kind of need the cable and the system to record it. So that's one thing that can fetch in sometimes over $100 depending on what kind of package, what kind of model you have. Some VCRs can do pretty decently. If you find like the normal Panasonic one with like the blue line, those usually can fetch in like $40 or so, $40 to $50. If you find DVD recorders and VCR combo units, some of those can fetch in over $100, sometimes even a couple $100. So there's definitely some good money in there. So some cons with buying electronics is that a lot of the time this stuff doesn't work. There's been many times where I buy stuff from like Goodwill or yard sales. I bring it home, test it out, and it turns out to be broken or it's not working properly, whatever it might be. So that's kind of a risky take. If you are at thrift stores, try and test them out before you buy them. If you're at yard sales or garage sales, it's kind of a little bit harder to test those, so kind of take that risk. So you can get them for cheap, maybe it's worth it to buy it, even if it's broken and you don't know, just because it's cheap enough where you're not taking a huge loss. Another downside of electronics is that some of the big stuff like VCRs, like I mentioned, are big and bulky. You kind of need a big box for them. Typically I ship those via UPS ground or FedEx ground because that's the cheapest rate. If you ship them to the post office, it's going to be very expensive. Keep that in mind if you're going to pick up something that big. I usually don't pick them up too much anymore, but if it's worth it to me, if I get them cheap enough, I definitely will pick them up because it's good money. Moving along to number 4 on the list are video games, like I mentioned. Consoles, they can go for pretty good money if they were working condition. That is PlayStation, Nintendo, Xbox, whatever it might be. Those all sell pretty nicely. I've sold some old PlayStation 2 games for like $80, $90. So depending on the different titles, as far as like actual games go, you can find some pretty good money in those. Not all video games sell for that much too, so keep that in mind as you look through them. Make sure you look them up before you buy it. A couple pros for getting video games is that they're pretty small and they're pretty easy to ship. Sometimes you can actually ship those media mail. I usually ship them first class, but yeah, they are super easy to ship. I usually just put them into like a bubble mailer and ship them out that way. Also with video games, you usually get a pretty decent sell-through rate on those, depending again on the title, on the system it's on. Typically, they can sell pretty fast if it's a very rare game. You can definitely get a lot of attention to it, a lot of demand for it, and it'll sell like overnight. That being said, some of the cons of looking for video games is that it's kind of hard to find pretty rare video games that sell pretty decently. Most times, if you go to thrift stores or yard sales, you'll find your typical sports games like MLB, Madden, NHL, whatever it might be. Most of those EA sports games don't do that well because they make one every year. But some of the old ones like NFL Blitz or NBA Street, some of those actually can go for maybe like $20 or so, I think. I've seen some. But yeah, for the most part, if you go to like a thrift store, you'll find your typical sports games that don't sell for very much. Make sure you look them up before you buy them. Another downside with video game buying is that you can't really test them if you don't have the system for it, especially at yard sales too. You can't really test them there. So that's kind of the downside, is that when you are buying these video games, you can't really test them until you bring them home and you have a system for it. But if you do have all that stuff and you can test it and it works properly, you can make some pretty decent money. Moving along to number 3 on my list are going to be toys and plush. I don't normally pick up a whole lot of plush anymore. There can be rare gems out there. I was out in California last year, found a Build-A-Bear plush that was like a green plush. That's an actual bear. And it was brand new with tags and sold for over $100. Some of the plush can do pretty well. A lot of like the Disney plush stuff out in the wild don't do as well. Get like a couple bucks for them, so it's probably not worth it. Plus plush is pretty easy. Try saying that 3 times. Plus plush is pretty easy Pretty easy to ship. I usually just throw them into a poly mailer and ship them out that way. If it's a little bit more of a high value item, then I'll put them in a box. For the most part, some of the smaller plush, they're pretty lightweight. They can go first class, so it shouldn't be an issue. Some of the old toys out there that do pretty decently, if you find some rare ones, they can actually go for pretty good money as well. Like figures, G.I. Joes, some vintage Barbies can do pretty well. I mean, there's a lot of toys out there, a lot of like random toys. Hot Wheel red lines, they do very well. Those are like from the 70s. So there are a lot of gems out there, but the downside is that it's hard to find those items. Some of the typical toys that I've usually picked up in the past are going to be like Bop Hits. I don't usually pick them up anymore because I think the value has actually gone down. Used to be able to get like $30, 30, even sometimes $40 for those Bop It Extremes. But yeah, for the most part, some of those toys can be decent, can be good sellers. Some board games can actually do pretty well. Some old vintage board games can do pretty decently. You usually get like $50, $60 on some of those old ones that are rare. Some of the downsides of buying toys is that they can be broken, they might not work if it's an electronic item. Some of the plush might have holes in it, whatever it might be. There could be some sort of damage on the toys because they've been playing around with so much in the past. So that's kind of a downside. Some puzzles have missing pieces. Lego have missing pieces too. So that's kind of a risky take if you're going to go this route of buying toys. But if I see something good, I would definitely look it up before I buy it. Keep that in mind. That was number 3. Number 2 on my list are going to be clothing and hats. When I go into Goodwill, I go straight to the clothing area. Now, there's a lot of clothes that Goodwill has, so it can be very overwhelming if you don't look through. If you're not going to go through every aisle of clothing items, I can understand that because there's quite a lot of them. But I enjoy buying clothing items. I don't buy every single clothing item, so you kind of have to really dig through it and search for certain items. But sometimes you can find some pretty rare stuff. I found some vintage t-shirts at a yard sale last year. I found 9 of them, and they were all from like the 90s. I did find a Jaws from 1993 shirt that was like a mail-in item that's super rare. Picked it up for $5, sold it for $400. I'll put up the comp over here. But yeah, some of those vintage t-shirts can do very well, especially like old band tees, and they're easy to ship. Typically you ship those like first class if it's a t-shirt. Sometimes you have to go priority and ship them through like a poly mailer or through a USPS box. They're usually pretty easy to ship. Same thing goes for hats. Hats are super lightweight. All shipped first class. You can find some good looking hats from like Mitchell & Ness, New Era, like the sports hats. Some of those unique prints can go for pretty good money as well. So that's why I enjoy shipping those. They're easy to clean too, clothing and hats. And there's going to be some rare items out there. Not everything is going to be a rare item, but you know what? I enjoy looking for those and finding some of those. So I found a band tee at Goodwill for $4 and sold it for $100. So doesn't always happen, but you know, sometimes you get lucky and find some pretty good items. So that's why I enjoy number 2, which is clothing. So some of the downsides of buying clothing for reselling is that a lot of times they can be rips and tears and stains and whatnot on them. A lot of the time, probably like 95% of the time, it's just a basic shirt and they don't go for that much. So like I mentioned before, you kind of have to dig for the better items, better brands, better styles too. Sometimes a certain brand and style doesn't sell, but that same brand and different style sells pretty nicely. So you kind of have to keep that in mind with clothing items. And then with like hats, I will ship them all in boxes, so I have to buy boxes or find boxes that'll fit these hats. And a lot of times the hats aren't like super high value items unless you can find those unique print designs or whatever. That's the downside of clothing. There's not like a whole lot of downside for clothing items, at least in my opinion. That's why I like to pick those up. And the top thing that I love to pick up for reselling on eBay are shoes. You can kind of bundle this into clothing as well, but I made it separately just because that's kind of like where a majority of my sales come from, is picking up shoes. Now everybody wears shoes, that's why it's like a hot item. Everybody loves shoes, and I don't pick up every single shoe item out there. You definitely have to pick and choose certain ones to make it worth it. You can find some pretty good decent value, especially if you find like Nikes, some higher end like designer shoes, dress shoes. So it can definitely be brand specific too, but it can also be style specific as well. So I like to pick up like Nikes, Adidas, like sport shoes, running shoes, Hoka's, On Clouds, but I also like to pick up like dress shoes as well, like Allen Edmonds, sometimes Johnson & Murphy. Some of those can sell pretty decently if you find like designer brand ones. Those can be kind of tricky because it's a designer and sometimes those can be faked, but I enjoy picking up all types of shoes, boots, like Ultra is a good brand as well. They make running shoes as well as hiking shoes, North Face, Merrell's, LL Bean, pretty much all of those, as long as it's in good condition and not like completely bald, falling apart, they will sell, and they will sell for majority decent money. Again, it depends on style as well, especially when there's so many different styles and colors of Nikes. A lot of those don't sell for that good money, so make sure you look them up. With the Nike tag, you can usually find the style code as well as the color code on the tag itself, on the size tag, and a lot of the other shoe brands also have a size tag as well as style code and color code, so pretty easy to look up. Just look them up on eBay and see if it goes for any money. So yeah, that's why I enjoy picking up shoes. They do pretty decently and pretty consistently for me. Some of the downsides of buying shoes though is that a lot of times they can be in pretty rough shape. If you find like holes and tears and stains on there that you can't get out, usually it drops a lot in value too, especially in that case. So I usually don't pick up any shoes that have like holes in them. You also need to look at the tread on the bottom. If it's completely bald, probably will pass on those. No one wants like a bald pair of shoes. As long as it's still in decent shape, still has some tread left, it's a good color combination, it's a good style, I will definitely pick those up. Another downside of shoes is that you kind of have to clean them too. So I will clean pretty much every shoe that I pick up, and cleaning takes time. It takes time to make them look good. I do have shoe cleaner, I have a brush. I take my time and clean them. Usually takes me probably about an hour or two to clean like 5 to 10 shoes. So it takes me a long time to clean shoes just because I like to make them look pretty nice. Plus it's very satisfying to find like a dirty pair of shoes that's still in good condition and it's just like dirt. And once you like clean off all the dirt, it's like a shiny brand new pair of shoes, it seems like. And a lot of people will just donate their shoes because they don't want to clean them. So as long as you take the time and put in the work, it'll definitely pay off for you. Another downside of buying shoes, especially if you buy Jordans, they can be very easily faked. A lot of the Nike higher end stuff, they can be faked, so keep that in mind. I do use an app called Check to do my authentication on those higher end Jordans that I pick up. They usually will go through like the photos that I send them and authenticate them on their end to say if it's passed or not for them. Also, it'll go through the eBay authentication process as well to double check to make sure that it is truly a pair of Jordans. But there have been times where you pick up Nikes or whatever, or Adidas, and if you send them in and they look fishy, they look weird, the tag looks weird, and they're fake. So just keep that in mind. Jordans especially, there's tons of fakes out there. So just kind of do your own due diligence and look them up and kind of investigate the shoe and see if it looks weird or off or something doesn't feel right. Just make sure you look them up first before, because I will not sell any fake shoes myself, and it's probably not a good thing for you to sell fake shoes. eBay will probably ban you if you do that. Keep that in mind if you're going to go the shoe route. A lot of Jordans especially will be faked. I love picking up all types of shoes, sandals, whatever it might be. It's fun to see all these different styles and brands that I've never heard of before in the past, and seeing that, yeah, there's some of these items that can be very good to pick up, very good value. Plus, sometimes it's good style and it's my size, then I'll keep them. So I did find a pair of Jordans for myself and they're great. I normally don't buy Nikes because I have a very wide foot and Nikes don't fit my feet that well, but these Jordans actually fit pretty nicely. So yeah, sometimes I can find some good stuff and I'll keep for myself, and a lot of times I will just resell them because they're great. So, but those are the top 5 things that I love to resell. What are the top 5 things that you like to resell? Let me know in the comments below on what those are. That's gonna be it for this one. Thank you all for watching. If you guys enjoyed this, make sure you hit the like button down below. Subscribe for more thrifting content like this. If you guys are interested in any of the items that I am selling, I have my email store linked down below as well. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!